You know, that's all right to the grid. You know?
Hey there, it's Mickey Abraham from Lessons with Marcel, and I've got a really interesting guest today, someone that I've never met in person, but I've been following his flat picking music for many years, going back almost 10 years ago. I was so intrigued by his playing, I wanted to do an interview with Stash. That interview never quite happened, so it's now 10 years later. Glad to make it happen now on the YouTube channel. Stash, how's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So it's been interesting how we got reconnected, right? A student of mine that I met through Marcel went to see you play. His mind was blown. He says to me, Mickey, have you ever heard of Stash? And I'm like, yeah, of course I've heard of Stash. Yeah, man, I've been following his playing forever. Oh, you know how Paul even knew to go see you was another Lessons with Marcel video. Jake Eddy follows your music and dropped your name in a Lessons with Marcel video talking about how fast flatpickers can play.
You know, I think Stash. If anyone here knows Stash Wyslouch, he's a great guitarist he's out in the Bay Area, and he put this quote. Gosh, I can't remember who it was from. Some jazz great about that they wanted to be the slowest, jazz player of all time, and he said that maybe he would be the slowest flat picker of all time, and I think that's something great to strive for,
And that really piqued Paul's interest, and that's what made him go see you. And man, his mind was blown.
I'm still on the quest to be the slowest flat picker.
What do you mean by that?
For one, I like the idea of being able to play as little as possible to imply the song that you're playing. I think there's more to flat picking than playing really fast, and most of what you see is big emphasis on playing fast. And I think there's a lot to be said for playing slow and deliberate and not fast and automatic.
I agree with that completely. You have to play tastefully slow before you can ever create anything fast.
Yeah, and sometimes, the music demands fastness, and it's good to develop that. But as I'm entering my second half of life, I know it's time to play slower.
I mentioned that you played with the Deadly Gentlemen, was the Bluegrass band from that time period around, would you say, was that like 2010-ish?
Yeah, 2010 to 2015.
And so I was introduced to you by that, but it was really obvious that you come from like a rock and roll metal background. What made you make the leap from rock and roll and metal into bluegrass and flat picking?
It's a very direct pathway. I played in a heavy metal band in high school. Heavy metal band had an electric fiddle player. The electric fiddle player, named Andy Reiner, who's still out there doing great music, also played acoustic fiddle. He was part of a family band in Lexington, Massachusetts called the Reiner Family Band. So when we go over there for heavy metal practice, there was also kind of this acoustic stuff in the background. His dad had a big collection of mandolins, so he'd show me mandolins. That piqued my interest, and then I got an acoustic guitar, and Andy kind of introduced me to actually learning tunes on the guitar, playing rhythm acoustic.
Did this friend introduce you to bluegrass recordings?
So I remember he showed me like Vassar Clements, Lonesome Fiddle Blues, and the big thing for me was the Garcia Grisman stuff, and that was kind of like the gateway.
And what a difference from metal. I mean, that's like it's like laid back and chill, but it hit you at the right time.
It hit me at the right time, yeah. And I'd gotten into the mandolin a little bit, and so mandolin, there was no context, there's no metal context or something. It was just like, oh, mandolin's cool, David Grisman's cool. Let's figure this out. Oh, maybe a guitar is more in demand or more. I already have some background with guitar, so I'm going to check out what acoustic guitar does. I mean, I distinctly remember taking a lesson with an acoustic guitarist, Matt Arcara, and him teaching me what tone was when I was 18 or 19. And that was like a thing. I was like, oh, okay, it's not just like the knob on the guitar. It's like sound that you can produce with your hands and the wood of the guitar.
If you've ever listened to Stash play fiddle tunes or traditional bluegrass music, you might notice he has a really interesting take on melody, an interesting take on rhythm, And before we started this interview, Stash and I were talking about where this comes from. You know, like, is this something that you even consciously even tried to do to sound, I don't know, lack of a better term, outside the box, outside note choice, outside rhythmically, and does it even sound outside to you? People tend to play what they think sounds good to them. Would you share a little bit with what you were telling me about how it might even change from if I asked you that question a few months ago?
I've always liked these kind of things. So in jazz, for example, when I got into jazz in high school, I liked Thelonious Monk. I liked late era John Coltrane. I liked Albert Ayler. So these kind of guys that were on the fringes, but they all had their thing dialed in from the inside out. So they all clearly studied tradition deeply. And you could hear that even when they were playing the most out things. The same thing was when I was into heavy metal. I liked Metallica. That was kind of my jumping off point. But then slowly, oh, what's this Florida death metal scene? Oh, what are these guys doing in Norway with this weird extreme metal? It's like, it almost sounds abrasive. So I've always been kind of attracted to this outside the box thing. Like with anything, it's like you start with what you like and then you go backwards and forwards. One of the things I remember, seminal moment for Bluegrass, was hearing Andy Statman play on some early country cooking record and being like, whoa, this is a crazy mandolin solo out of nowhere, or like Tony Trischka stuff. It's seen outside the box, and then it's like, okay, what's going on there? It sounds like he's just kind of playing like Anarchy or something. It's like, okay, so then you try to play Anarchy, and then you start doing it, and then you say, well, you know, this falls kind of flat after half a minute. Maybe there could be some logic to it. And then you start exploring some logic of what these outside the box things, and then slowly you start building up from behind and forward. That gets you into intervals. Okay, what can we do with intervals? A major third on its own is pretty standard, but if you start transposing major thirds around, just the interval, moving them up in major seconds symmetrically, all of a sudden it starts to sound pretty outside, even though the logic is still pretty basic. There's some people who they seem to just totally exist in a vacuum and they just make crazy weird music and you can't totally tell where it's coming from. But I feel like most people are rooted in some kind of tradition.
Do you think your fans that listen to your music are fans of bluegrass and flatpicking, or are they coming at it from another place?
All the above. So
when you're doing shows, you think that definitely people know you through the bluegrass community?
Probably more than anything, yeah.
Fascinating. That's amazing.
But maybe that's why nobody comes to my shows. It's sad.
That's hilarious. Before we started this interview, when I was talking to you earlier, I asked you if you wouldn't mind playing a little bit. Maybe we can have you demonstrate some of these ideas for this video. Awesome. There's one video in particular that I thought was super interesting on your YouTube channel, and that's when you were talking about, and how do you know you actually know a tune?
Greetings, Stash Wyslouch here. I want to discuss criteria for answering the question, do I really know a fiddle tune?
I'm going to see if I remember that criteria, and then see if you can actually pick a tune and kind of demonstrate what you're going for, because I found it super interesting. And if I remember correctly, one of the criterias was you have to be able to take some of the notes away and make the song simple. That's a huge thing that I try to get across to my students, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and I want to see how you would do that with a tune. You have to be able to play the tune in different keys, all different keys.
I think that helps.
Which leads to your third idea is, if you're not in the open position, can you play the tune at different places on the neck? Now, to a beginner flat picker, this stuff might seem super hard and super intense, but maybe you can demonstrate on how simple that might be with a melody of your choice.
I'll take a tune, Ragtime Annie. Everybody plays it. For some reason, I haven't learned it till kind of recently. Listen to a bunch of versions. Feel good picking those versions as they are. So like I took like kind of a hybrid of like Kenny Baker and Johnny Gimbel and kind of just, and it basically equaled out to what I generally hear people do like in jam sessions, which is really what I'm after. So, you know, be able to play it. So the Kenny Baker version goes something like this. And then there's there's the reduction process, which I think is really helpful. And maybe I do this before positions or keys, just to be practical about it. And the reduction is, can I play this now as exclusively quarter notes? So the process of that is literally, you could go through, if you had a tab of it, just cross out everything that's upbeat. And you could start there. And it sounds something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you might have to do a little bit of editing, because sometimes by eliminating upbeats, you might be eliminating a crucial element of the melody, because sometimes the crucial notes, the essential notes, do fall on upbeats because of some inherent syncopation or something like that. So there you have to go in with your creative pad and kind of say, okay, am I still playing the tune? And by the way, I got this idea from Billy Contreras, who talks about this a lot, to think about this stuff, and he used this really effectively. So that would be level 1. I would learn the quarter note version as well, if not better, than the other version. You know, I'd learn the distilled version. And then the next level, could I play this as half notes? If you really just cut it out, it starts to sound less and less like Ragtime Annie, but you still kind of see those fence post notes. And then, so I edit it because I think that 6th note is kind of a crucial part of the Ragtime Annie. So I like to play it like. At the very least, you start seeing like that B part, you could actually play it like whole notes and it would still sound quite Ragtime Annie-ish. That's what's going on. You know, it's something like that. The thing kind of goes down, and then at the end it kind of resolves to the D. I'm hearing the chord changes, but I'm really just interested in the melody. And in the same way, like jazz musicians might play off a chord structure, well, this would be a good way to start playing off the melody structure. So when people say like, hey man, you got to know the melody, you got to know the melody. Well, for me, it didn't work to play the exact same Kenny Baker melody for 15 minutes in a row. I stopped thinking, I shut off. So I have to like set up these little obstacle courses to kind of like check myself constantly, like, hey, do I actually know the melody? And then when I go back and play the 8th note melody, I can feel that skeletal melody much more.
Would you take Ragtime Annie and then learn it in different keys also?
Yeah, the different keys, we start getting out of practical land, and that's really like, that's pretty advanced. So I would say before I do different keys, I'd say different positions. So, you know, I think of like 5 positions on the neck. I think like similar to what people might associate with like the caged system. So I think of my positions as where my root is. So, you know, 2A would be my 2nd finger on the A string, boom. So I can kind of play the scale, and then I'd go maybe with just the quarter note version. Then there's 4E for me, which is 4th finger on the low E string is my lowest root. So for D, that starts on the 10th fret relative to the nut. And this is nice because this is all objective stuff. You're going down a checklist and saying, can I play a 4E? Doesn't matter if you're inspired or not. Boom. You know? Cool. Then 2E. And then 2E, you start getting into the next octave. Well, let's see what that's like, you know? Cool. You could go to 2D. Yeah, so this could be just 10 minutes, just structured. And you can't do all this. You can't do all this in a day. You can be loose about this. But the idea is, you know, if you have 15 minutes, you can make a really specific goal. You know, and if you're looking at music as a lifetime thing, it's like, this is great. 10 minutes. Can I play Ragtime Annie up here at 2D, starting around the 12th fret or whatever? And there's no immediate results. It just slowly leaks in.
Would you demonstrate possibly some of your outside lines and or wider intervallic licks that some of the flat pickers might have never even heard?
Okay, yeah. I got an idea. So sometimes I play this Bill Monroe tune, In Despair. And I'll start off kind of like this. 2, 3, 4.
That's crazy, bro.
And it's pretty worked out. So that's almost always kind of what I do. But I think it's like a good example of some of the ideas that maybe I might think of that I think are pretty, you can quickly tie them back to like very normal tonal logic. So, this is like the intro. We're in the key of C. Boom. I just bust up a minor sixth and play the exact same thing. But, with good time, with good groove. So all of a sudden, it kind of sounds like we're in A flat for a second. And then I'll do that, and then I'll just repeat it up a minor six again. And then, so there I just hit the C major triad. And this is random. I think I just wanted kind of a big arching shape. So I just jumped up. I wanted two notes that are outside of the key. Boom, I hit a D flat and I hit a G flat. We're in the key of C, so those are going to be way out. And then the chord goes to F. Well, there's a tension resolves to F. That's an A and a C note, third and the fifth of the F. But I wanted to kind of bounce it off a lower thing that's maybe not totally F-E. So I just hit an E flat and a B flat, which actually isn't that far out because it's kind of like C minor pentatonic stuff. And then I just wanted a little thing that goes brr. Random stuff, just sweep it. Just like
and that kind of goes to what you were talking about, listening to Monk.
Yeah.
I think that's something that Monk would do while playing a melody, like just
totally.
da-ba doo ba doo ga da ba and just hit these keys
it's like
or something.
Percussive, and like who cares about the notes? Yeah, it's more about time and sound and the instrument than like being in the key of C.
Right. So it's something like that is definitely something you're hearing in your head from listening to something like Monk.
Yeah.
Totally. When you play something like that, do you feel that your audience is as surprised by the stuff as you are when you play it? Because it's so different than what you hear. It sounds random, but when you explain it this way, it's very unrandom, and it's like, oh, I want to hear these two notes against this. I want to hear this figure moved up. Does it sound as random? It doesn't sound random to you, huh? It sounds totally musical because that's what you like.
Oh, yeah, to me, I hear it vocally. I really do hear it, like maybe without being able to reproduce the pitches exactly with my voice. I hear that's all right to the grid. And that's just like rhythm and shapes. And then you just have to kind of paint by number or whatever and fill it in. Oh, how outside are these things going to be? Oh, maybe we need to bring it back inside.
Could you play a whole set and play it as a little straighter melody, or are you itching to go there?
Probably, but I'm usually itching to go there to some extent. But I think maybe now as I'm entering the second half of life, I need to tone it back a little, or maybe right now there's been this thing where I just want to get all this stuff out. Yeah, let's put as many crazy intervals in there as possible. Let's see what the limit of this can be. Let's explore it. Oh, let's do it in all transpositions, blah, blah, blah. And now it's more like, actually, I can be satisfied with one transposition, and maybe I just really need to get inside this one thing, or singing this extremely straight, but being extremely present when I'm doing this, And that's more where I think I need to go. So maybe it'll end up manifesting in playing whole sets that sound much more straight.
Interesting. I see what you mean. Most people, I think, when they play music for a living, they're always concerned with playing something that the audience is going to like.
Yeah.
Not just in bluegrass, obviously, but in the music industry, producers, pop singers. I think that you are a true artist in that sense, where you're really concerned with what you tick musically and what turns you on musically way more than is the audience going to understand what it is that I'm playing. And hopefully they do. Hopefully they like it and find it artistically interesting. But it seems like you're putting your own satisfaction and joy first and foremost.
Yeah, well, when you put it like that, it makes me sound a little selfish.
Well, I think art is a personal... Art's a very personal kind of thing, So, an artist, I think, hopefully they're painting a picture or singing a song. You should enjoy it when no one's even around. I think I'm coming more from that perspective than like not a selfish more than any other reason than we wear a shirt because we like it.
I like that a lot. And I think about that a lot because sometimes when I'm practicing by myself and I think, if I'm not, there's kind of this thing like, yeah, whatever. When we get to the bandstand, it'll happen. It's like, actually, that attitude needs to change. Like, you need to do something right here, right now. Like, Sun Ra has a great quote. Like, Sun Ra, nobody would go to a lot of his shows because he's totally out to lunch. And he had this big band. And he would always tell his band, like, you're not playing for the audience, you're playing for the creator. To kind of just get them to really to just be as present as possible in any musical situation, even if there's one person in the audience or if you're just practicing for each other or for yourself. I like that because I think it's really hard to generate that on your own.
So what are you doing these days? I know the Deadly Gentleman is long gone, and you're playing with Jake Jolliffe. You still do that?
Yeah.
And I know you do solo shows because my friend Paul saw you solo. What else are you up to these days?
Mostly playing solo these days, so I book as many solo tours as my limited schedule can allow. I'm teaching a lot, Zoom and in person here in the Bay Area where I live. I also like to make videos of both the creative stuff I'm putting out as a solo show and educational videos. And then I'm raising a child.
That's amazing. Yeah, you have a newborn, right? Mazel tov, Stash. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Everything I've done, the pace has been reduced at least by factor 2.
Yeah, of course. Can't imagine how you have the time to do any gigs with a newborn at home. You mentioned the Skype lessons. Where can folks find you? What's your website?
StashWyslouch.com.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I'm glad you're staying busy, and I'm glad you have the new family member. That's just beautiful. And it's been so interesting to hear your take on your music. I've been so curious to get inside your mind, and I know that other folks they're either having their mind blown or wondering why is he playing these crazy notes. You're truly a one-of-a-kind original artist, Stash.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Would you consider coming back and doing it again?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll come back anytime.
When I mentioned interviewing you for Marcel's channel, you said, "Oh man, I love Marcel's channel. I watch it all the time." And I was thinking, what do you get out of watching Marcel's videos?
Bluegrass flatpicking is kind of extremely niche, and somebody like Marcel is able to bottle it up and communicate what's so cool and what's so important about what's going on without cheapening it.